Hello there, it's your friend Phil, Project Management Trainer, PMP Exam Coach. This video is about honing in to those core inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs in the PMBOK Guide, 5th edition. Now, students who study for the PMP exam know that these ITTOs are all over the place. There's 220 of them, but the good news is you can sort them out. You can review the ITTOs in such a way that you do not sweat the small stuff. And what I mean by sweating the small stuff is not thinking about stuff that is not unique, not worrying about things that are not unique, and also for those things that are not unique, finding ways to kill several birds with one stone. So let's use the ITTO tool from Praizion here. Let's filter the inputs. And let's look for all the places where we have two things. Enterprise environmental factors is one, and the second is organizational process assets. Let's filter to take a look at where we've got these inputs. Now, we take a look here, we have 65 records of these two items. Knowing these items cold could save you tons of time. So my first tip is open up the PMBOK Guide and read these two things the best way you can. It will save you a ton of time. That's 65 records. Okay, let's clear that filter now. Now let's look for one more thing that you really do need to know for this exam. Let's take a look at project management plan. Now take a look at all of the entries, and we're only looking at the outputs now, right? The inputs, I beg your pardon. Taking a look at the inputs now. Okay. So we found 23 processes, 23 lines, which means 23 processes where this project management plan is used. That's almost half of the processes use a project management plan as an input. They don't use their subsidiary plan. Literally, they use the project management plan. If I were you, again, you want to go to page 78. You want to know what is in the project management plan. You want to know what it's all about. You want to read the details on page 78 in the PMBOK Guide. Know what your change management plan is. Read the definitions, configuration management plan, risk management plan, human resource management plan. All of the subsidiary plans on page 78. Read them. Okay? Now let's unfilter this, and one other very important thing also on page 78, and I'm going to go to the outputs here, project documents updates, 31 records, 31 places folks, 31 processes where project documents updates is mentioned. Wouldn't it pay you to know what these project documents really are? It's on page 78. The risk register, the project schedule, activity attributes, all of that stuff. You got to know it. You got to be able to separate fact from fiction. So I've covered some really big ticket items when it comes to these inputs and outputs. Under the tools and techniques, another big ticket item which could save you so much time, just read it once, know what it is. 28 processes where expert judgment is used. These are things that need to be addressed up front. EEFs, OPAs, project management plan, expert judgment, project documents. Read those, hone in on them, and know them once and for all. Okay? When you have done that, you would have gotten a massive chunk of work out of the way for almost every process. The next step is to begin to identify those unique ITTOs. What do I mean by unique? I mean ITTOs that only appear as an output from one process, or inputs that appear only in one process. Let's take a look at develop project charter really quickly. Again, these are techniques for studying ITTO. So you've got the small stuff out of the way. You know, the small stuff, it takes a lot of space. So EEFs, OPAs, and expert judgment, right? You get those out of the way. But then you begin to hone in on these unique things like project statement of work. That comes from your customer. Internal, external, could be. Business case. Why is this project being authorized? It does not come from any other process. It comes from an entity outside the project, like the sponsor. And then agreements. Now, these agreements in the genesis of the projects, we know they could come from the customer. They could be internal agreements, what have you. But what I'm trying to make you see is that these items, I call them big ticket unique items, folks. And if you're not studying your big ticket unique items like these ones, if you don't know what they are, where they're from, what they're used for, I feel sorry for you, because you're going into the exam without knowing the full picture. You don't want that to happen to you. You want to leave no stone unturned in understanding what is a business case. What is in it? What does it look like? Can I write a business case today with the knowledge I have? Or do I need to study more? If you cannot write a business case, if you cannot write a project statement of work without scratching your head, it tells me you're not there. So what are you doing? You're wasting time. You need to find those documents. If you're a student of ours, you need to open Project Management Essentials and start studying that stuff. Start looking for examples. And if you don't find examples in some of the texts you're reading, maybe you should search the web. Hey, project statement of work example. But then you have to measure that up against the PMBOK guide to make sure that they really are talking about the same thing. So that's one example. Let's go to another process in this array that is full of great stuff you need to read and know and understand. Okay, here we are at collect requirements. Now, collect requirements, you can see this is huge when it comes to the tools and techniques. Okay. We have the plans that are used, and the 3 plans that are used here. Scope, requirements, and stakeholder. Know what those are, know what they look like. If I were you, page 78, I would spend an afternoon, a lunch break, going through average of 3 to 5 minutes for every single one of those plans. So by the time you're done, you feel comfortable with a scope management plan, a requirements management plan, a stakeholder management plan. All right. Then you know what these are. Okay. Of course, these are all very unique things and very important. We see them recurring as inputs in other processes, but know them cold. Read them well. Study them. And then come into these tools and techniques, folks. This is where you really do need to spend time. What's the difference between a focus group and a facilitated workshop? Do you know that? Why would I choose to use a facilitated workshop over an interview? Why would I use group creativity techniques as opposed to an interview? Or could I use group creativity techniques and something else? If you don't know the definitions for these, you won't know how to use them. And if you are on the exam and you're given a question, you're a project manager, you're working with a team of experts, and they've reached a point where they can no longer generate any new ideas, which of the following should you use? Or you're working with a team and they cannot make a decision, which of the following should you use from this array? Or you're working with a team and you're given a scenario, what should you do? On the exam, there's going to be a ton of what should you do next, what is the best thing to do type question. And the only way you're going to be able to answer them really, really well is to understand these tools and techniques. So one more very important secret of sorts is tools and techniques. The sheer importance of tools and techniques. I know you hear ITTOs, and it's good. It's good to know what we're getting from something, and it's good to know what we're putting in. But hey, the tools and techniques are the engine that makes everything else run. You could have your inputs all day long. If you don't have solid tools and techniques to process the inputs, you've got nothing. So folks, tools and techniques are big on the exam. The tools and techniques will make you think again and again and again as far as what should I do next, because the action in the question, the action that's been demanded in the question lies in the tools and techniques. It does not lie in the inputs or the outputs. It lies in what you should do next. And what you should do next, you need to use a technique for it, or you need to apply a tool to it. So all of these tools and techniques that you see on the screen, these are extremely important. You want to master this array of tools and techniques for your exam. You want to know them cold. Like I said, don't sweat the small stuff. Expert judgment and other things that are common, don't sweat them. But you'll notice this, that in the tools and techniques, the repetition is extremely limited. You don't get the tools and techniques repeating themselves. I know expert judgment's there, yeah, we know that. Analytical techniques to some degree, but for the most part, that is the aspect of the ITTOs where you see a lot of uniqueness. You don't see a lot of repetition. And for that reason, I would like you to hone in. Turn that lens and hone in on the tools and techniques. You'll be extremely glad you did. Now, while everyone's trying to cram inputs and outputs, you will have a better idea of what your exam is going to test you on. It's going to test you a lot, heavily, on how to apply ideas, knowledge, understanding. How do you apply it? What makes the knowledge pragmatic? It's in carrying out a technique and applying a tool. So I hope that helps you. If you're a student of ours and you've got this tool, well, you know what to do. Put in alphabetical order, and you see that some of these tools and techniques repeat, like analogous estimating repeats once. We've got a whole bunch of places where analytical techniques is. But if I were you, again, you want to go down. You want to go down this list. There we go with all the expert judgments. But you want to go down the list because, like I said, the repetition is very minuscule compared to the inputs and the outputs. I hope that quick review helps fine-tune your studying. Make sure you quiz yourself and look for our video on those tools and techniques. We have a video that shows them for a split second as a checklist to make sure you know what those are. Something else I would like you to check out, if you haven't done this, I would like you to check out online something called the PMP exam cram list. I'm going to type it here so you're aware of what I'm saying. PMP exam cram list. You need to Google that term, get the free cram list that I have out there on Praizion's website. Get the cram list and use it as a checklist to go through all of the tools, techniques. And if you have enough time, you can throw in the inputs and outputs. I'm not saying don't study those. Hey, don't take what I said out of proportion. I'm not saying don't study inputs and outputs. I'm saying spend a lot of time. If I were you and I had 100% of time, I would do a 60-40 on tools and techniques, maybe even a 65-35 if I were you. This stuff is big. If you know what the tools and techniques are, then the inputs that you have on the other end will make more sense. And with that, we've come to the end of our quick review of the ITTOs and honing in on those tools and techniques. Thank you very much for your audience, and I look forward to seeing you as a PMP on the other side.